Let's see, per year I got 58,726.
Okay, so we're right around 60,000, can we say? Okay, everybody else, you get the 58,000? So let's just round that to 60 for the sheer hell of it. We're going to make 20 payments. We're going to pay $1,200,000 back to the bank. How much did we borrow?
500,000.
How much of that is interest then?
Whatever the answer is, less.
$700,000 or thereabouts, right? May shock you, but that's true. And any of you that have ever had a long-term mortgage at a even halfway reasonable rate know that that is the case, right? Your first mortgage payment is so little principal, you look at it and say, what am I doing? And I'll tell you what.
Tax benefits.
Yeah, you do get tax benefits, and by the way, if you buy a boat with a head and a galley, you can deduct that too. The head is a bathroom, by the way, for then a galley is a kitchen, for those of you that are not familiar with those terms. It's considered to be a second home, which is kind of nice. Anyway, again, make sure you understand here, if you compute this wrong, if you treat it as a future value of an annuity, you are going to get an answer that is just ridiculous. Look at it, okay? And I know this is the 27th time I've said this, but some of you will do these backwards, and you'll look at this, and you'll say, damn, I could buy a $500,000 house for $12 a month. This is great. Well, this is how we got in a mortgage crisis to begin with, folks, because people bought that. But at any rate, you know, be careful with these things. Now, what's the next one?
Answering the same question, assume we make payments every quarter instead of annually, and explain the difference in the interest paid.
Yeah, if we wanted to do this quarterly payments, right, we would do this, right? We've got this, what was the amount, 500 grand?
Yep.
The original one would have been this, right? That's how we would have done the original one, 10%, 20 payments. We have to make an adjustment. Now, we're still borrowing $500,000, only now it's going to be a quarterly rate. So this is 1/4 of 10%, right? Because a 10% annual rate would be 2.5% per quarter. And instead of 20 periods, I now have 80, right? Because I've got 80 quarters in 20 years. Of course, we're still dividing by I here. Did you do this one? Yeah. So we got, what was the original annual?
50.
Yeah, 50.
Exactly.
No, not exactly, but
No, but I mean, I need it exactly. Okay. We rounded it to 60,000 to make it easier, but
726.80.
Okay, 58,727, and that's close to what you got, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now the quarterly payments are what?
14,513.
Okay. So if we do annual payments, it's going to pay the bank $58,727 over a year's time, right? This is going to be $58,052, right? So I'm going to pay the bank less. This is a tough question to answer, believe it or not. I'm going to pay the bank less by making quarterly payments. I expect incredible specificity with this response, and I don't get it. And it's really straightforward. Why am I going to pay the bank less money if I make quarterly payments than if I make annual payments?
Compound interest. You're paying the interest.
Compound, that's
Time
part
value.
of it, but that will not get you any credit.
The time value of the money.
That will not get you any credit.
You're paying part of the principal each quarter, so you're not paying as much interest as your principal.
That will get you credit. Okay, that's what I mean by specific. You're right, both of you. Okay, but you've got to be specific. You've got to tell me this is really. I mean, you're correct. It's time value. You're correct. It's compounding, but you've got to be specific. I will reduce the principal on this loan, paying it quarterly, 90 days into it. Right? I will not reduce the principal on the other loan as originally stated until a year from now. Well, the minute I get a principal reduction, earlier in one case than in another case, I'm going to pay less interest over the life of that loan than I will the original one. I will have reduced the principal by some amount at the end of the first quarter. That means from that point forth, I will pay less interest. I don't get that benefit in the annual loan until the end of the very first year. Look, it's not a hell of a difference, okay, between annual and quarterly here, obviously, but it is at least some, right? I can make, what would it be, $700 almost a year right? So it's $14,000 over the life of this loan that I will not have to pay the bank because I made the payments quarterly as opposed to annually, right? Make sense? And again, make sure you get the specificity of response. What's next?
Due to the Tar Heel furniture problem at the end of chapter 3 with the following changes, the current ratio is 2 and the ACP is 15 days.
That would have just been, go back and do it with those two changes. It would have changed, what I changed, the ACP, average collection period. So you would have had a different number for receivables, right? Obviously, if it was different than before. And what was the other one?
The current ratio.
Current ratio, okay. So we would have had, we would have had a higher, because current ratio and original promise 2, we would have had a higher total current assets, which was okay, because if you remember, the difference between total current assets and total assets was a plug, right? It was just a subtraction, so it didn't matter what happened there. And of course, we would have had a greater amount of accounts, a greater amount of total current assets and a greater amount of accounts receivable. We would have been able to isolate everything there again but cash. Okay, it would have just changed a couple of things therefore. And that was actually a fairly straightforward thing to do, because many of the students told me after that they remembered the numbers that were unaffected by my changes. So it was just ding, 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 ding. Okay, now I got to start computing things. Because this changes and this changes, but nothing else did. Okay, I mean, the first thing is, right, nothing on the right-hand side of the balance sheet changes. True? And I've got 2.5 times 1.2 million, so I've got 3 million in total current assets instead of 2.4 million. And yes, I've looked at that problem too often if I can remember this, but so now I've got 3 million, so I've got 7 million in, or whatever it was, in fixed assets. Forget what the number is now, but it's a plug, right? So it's no big deal. And now it's just a matter of figuring out what accounts payable is. Well, you know what that is from the collection period. And what inventories is, you know what that is because the quick ratio hadn't changed. And then cash just falls out at the end. So that was actually a pretty straightforward problem. What's next?
What is the Federal Reserve likely to do with interest rates in the near future and why?
Good question. I won't ask you that because we didn't spend as much time talking about current stuff as I would have liked. By the way, the answer to that question is who the hell knows, virtually at all times. Now you could argue now that the Fed's going to raise rates because they're at or near zero in many cases. My thought a year ago, and I actually published some of these findings, was that we'd see the Fed start to raise rates right about now. At the November meeting was what I thought. Not going to happen. Okay, I don't know when they're going to raise rates. I know some very savvy bond traders who think it's going to be another full year before the Fed does anything with rates. I mean, they're trying to figure out a way now to buy more Treasury securities to underpin this market, a thing they call quantitative easing. We all call quantitative easing. Because the Fed, folks, is running out of bullets. The federal government is running out of bullets because nobody will accept anybody doing any kind of stimulus package because the deficits were already running. It's just a crap economy. I mean, it's just, this is referred to as the Great Recession, right? Because it's far and away the deepest and the most profound since the Depression of the early 30s. You've heard that, heard this is referred to as the Great Recession. What else, if there's anything left? That's it?
That's it.
Ta-da. Anybody have any other questions on anything we did not cover? This is your last shot at me.
Is there any current stuff on the final?
Oh, on the final there may be.
Or I'm sorry,
Not on this
test.
test, but not on this test, no. Now, ordinarily, I would come in, I think we talked about this, and say, okay, what new and exciting things happened since your last minute? And we do talk about that a couple of times, but never to the level that again, understand what was going on, particularly in '08. That discussion of what new and exciting things have happened since we last met could take up half the damn class. I mean, we literally had to cut it off. Thankfully, that has settled down. We don't have markets that are seized completely. Securities that literally were not trading at all 2 years ago, at least now are trading. Bizarre, bizarre world. Anything else? See you, well, hell, in about 72 hours.